I rise in support of this bill and commend Chairman Micah and Chairman Petri because as a former chair of the Aviation Subcommittee, I know how difficult it is to bring all the competing interests together and produce a bill such as this. However, I would like to raise one issue that I still have some concerns about. It's been brought to my attention by a former outstanding member of this body, Jim Coyne, a former congressman from Pennsylvania and who has been the longtime head of the National Air Transportation Association, that some airports are engaging in activities that compete with privately owned fixed-base operators. I did not file an amendment because the chairman has graciously agreed to hold a formal roundtable discussion about this matter and begin working to make sure that this does not become commonplace. I hope that this is not a trend that will continue, because privately owned businesses should not have to compete with government or quasi-governmental agencies such as airport authorities, which do not pay taxes and are not subject to all the rules and regulations that private businesses are. Each time there's been a White House conference on small business, and they've held one on average every 5 years since 1955, either the number one concern or one of the top three concerns at all these White House conferences on small business has been freedom from government competition. Madam Speaker, since the Eisenhower administration in 1955, it has been U.S. policy, or supposed to have been, that government, quote, should not start or carry on any commercial activity to provide a service or product for its own use if such a product or service can be procured from private enterprise through ordinary business channels. And so that is my concern, and we're going to continue working on that. I also want to mention an amendment that will be filed later by Mr. Schuster on behalf of myself and Mr. Meehan, my colleagues from Pennsylvania, a very common sense amendment. This amendment that we will be filing does two very simple things. It states that the FAA should not use a one-size-fits-all approach when considering new regulations. It also requires the FAA to take into consideration the cost it is imposing on the private sector when issuing new regulations. This amendment simply codifies some or much of an executive order issued by President Obama on January 18th of this year. Quoting from the President's executive order, the President said, "Our regulatory system, quote, must be based on the best available science. It must allow for public participation and an open exchange of ideas. It must promote predictability and reduce uncertainty. It must identify and use the best, most innovative, and least burdensome tools for achieving regulatory ends, and it must take into account benefits and costs, both quantitative and qualitative." In addition, FAA Administrator Randy Babbitt has stated that a one-size-fits-all approach to rulemaking can make aviation less safe. There are different segments of the aviation industry that face very different challenges. I believe that by tailoring regulations toward these different segments of the industry, we can make aviation safer by helping address the different challenges that different types of businesses face. Finally, I would like to say that I agree with the chairman about overstaffing in regard to our aviation regulation. I am amazed, Madam Speaker, at how many members and private citizens have expressed concerns about TSA overstaffing and have mentioned the line of thousands standing around. The number of screeners has gone up, as I understand it, from 16,000 prior to 9/11 to 61,000 now, and that is simply far, far too many, and that needs to be looked into, and I know the chairman intends to do that. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation.